Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Vita, the Chief of the Music Division here at the Library of Congress. Welcome to our screening of the Jazz Loft according to W. Eugene Smith. We are delighted to have with us writer and documentarian Sam Stevenson, who is a 2024 Library of Congress Jazz Scholar. And we are delighted to have him here with us and talking about this film. He's made this fascinating world of his film a lifetime labor of love. For more than 25 years, he has comprehensively researched the fascinating world of this film, documenting the, I can't even imagine, 40,000 photographs and 4,000 hours of audio tape amassed by Smith. He produced a major multimedia project, which included an exhibition and a radio series. He's written 3 books, 2 of these, Dream Street and the Jazz Loft Project. They were published in new editions last year. The Jazz Loft, according to W. Eugene Smith, is a product of WNUC Presents. Yeah. In association with Lumiere Productions. It was written, produced, and directed by Sarah Fisco, and we would like to thank her warmly for her help in arranging our screening. The film was made possible by the family of philanthropist Dan Logan, and his Ravada Foundation so generously underwrites all the jazz programming that we are proud to present here at the library. We are incredibly grateful to Dan for his support and encouragement, making it possible for us to share so many superlative concerts, lectures, and films over the past 9 years. I remember before Dan approached us to offer to support jazz, we would have maybe 1 jazz concert a year, which we would eke out of because what we do here at the library or in the music division is we put on concerts, but we put them on with the money that comes from the endowments that we have, and the endowments are set up by donors, which we love, and they make statements of what they want done with the money, and there were no jazz affiliated or inspired donations. So when Dan came to us and suggested that we would be able to do more than 1 a year, we jumped at the idea, and I think a lot of you probably have benefited from the concerts that we have had that were supported by Dan and his foundation. And we have some upcoming really good jazz things. So please now join me in welcoming Sam Stevenson and to hear about this amazing adventure that he's been on.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here at the library. Libraries are one of my happy places, and so it's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. So thank you. I did spend all those years on this, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't times where I wondered if that was what I should have been doing, but it happened. And so what's going to happen tonight is you're going to see the film, which is 86 minutes. I'm going to introduce it and kind of tell you how I got into this. And then we'll watch the film in 86 minutes. And then in my experience of presenting this material in whatever form we did a lot of different forms, it raises a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure that there's some time for that, because we have to clear the room by 9:15. So let me just get started on Eugene Smith. I want you to see these two pictures. This is the same negative, and I think this is a very extreme version of what he did in the darkroom with his negatives, which was very arduous and time-consuming and painstaking. But he was a combat photographer in World War II, very young, and during my research, I did over 500 oral history interviews over the years, and one of them was with a photographer named David Vestal, who was also a renowned teacher of photography, and he knew Smith pretty well. And Smith, as you'll hear in the film, had a lot of problems and a lot of struggles. And David said, Gene's basic problem was what he saw was actually not there. So his camera was not capable of recording it. So then he had to work to make you see that, which is what he saw. And then he did this throughout the rest of his life. This is a very extreme example of the manipulation of a negative. But I just wanted you to have that in your mind as we go about this. Here's another picture from Saipan that he made in World War II. I went to Saipan and kind of walked in his footsteps. My work kind of culminated in a book called Gene Smith's Sink, which is text only, and you can read it in about 4 hours. But it was like the whole 20 years kind of went into that book, and I distilled it down to 196 pages. But I went to Saipan and followed his footsteps. This is out in the Pacific Theater. This is Iwo Jima. I tried to go to Iwo Jima in 2011, but they only open it to civilians one day a year. And the day that they opened it was the day after the earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011. So I was not able to get out there. Tennessee Williams Theater was a big preoccupation of Smith's. So he became and you'll hear more about this in the film, but he became a photo essayist for Life magazine, which before television was the primary source of visual imagery in the country, if not the world. And they're for a commercial magazine to have the circulation they had will never ever happen again before television, because it was not just the people that subscribed, but it was in every library, every doctor's office, everywhere. So the number of people that saw it each week was astounding. And so Smith made a lot of money there as a photographer. This is Country Doctor in rural Colorado, 1948. This is in Spain, Spanish Village. This was an essay he did there. And the early 50s. Nurse midwife in rural South Carolina. So what I want to impress upon you with just these few pictures you've seen is Smith is living in New York with his family. He's working at Life magazine, which is based in Midtown, Manhattan. And then he's going out into the world and documenting something with his camera that's usually foreign to the readers of Life magazine, whether it be rural South Carolina, rural Spain, rural Colorado, the war. That was what his job was. He went out into the world, and then he came back to New York and created an essay. And this is the opening of the nurse midwife essay. Each one of these essays was preceded by enormous fights with the editors over control of the work. And before Smith, the photographer's job was over when the button was pushed on the camera. It was over at that point. And they would literally ship the film to Life magazine, where they would develop it and print it and decide which ones were going to be published. And Smith was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, you're not touching my film. You're not touching my layouts. You're not deciding what's going to be put in there. You're not writing the text. And so he really set a new standard for artistic control of photography. But it was a brutal process. This is a picture called A Walk to Paradise Garden, which was his two kids in Croton on Hudson, outside New York. The he made this picture right after the war. He was hit by shell fire, and and had his face was really messed up, and he had a bunch of surgeries of his mouth and neck. And this is the first photograph he made after that. So this is again Albert Schweitzer in Africa. Again, he's going out into the world, coming back with a story. So then he quit life after that Schweitzer essay was published, and he was fed up with life. I think they were fed up with him. And his first assignment he joined Magnum, the prestigious photographers cooperative, and his first assignment as a freelancer was to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and make 100 photographs commemorating the city's bicentennial. Highly scripted photographs. We want you to photograph this and this and this. And they expected him to take 2 weeks. And he ended up staying for 4 years and made 20,000 photographs. And then he attempted to arrange them in a sequence that he compared to Beethoven and James Joyce and stuff like that. And so, of course, that project was impossible, and he failed. He never finished it. And so that's where I came in 1997. And still am fascinated by the city of Pittsburgh. I think it's one of the most interesting cities in the United States by far. And what's his name? A writer for New Yorker, Brendan Gill, once wrote that if Pittsburgh were located in the heart of Europe, people would travel thousands of miles to see it. But here it's Disneyland and things like that people go see. And I think that's true. It's a fascinating place. At one point in time, they produced 2/3 of the world's steel came out of that city. So Smith goes there with these pent-up frustrations and just explodes. So my first project was Dream Street, became Dream Street, which is a book, and it was to try to put together his failed Pittsburgh project, and that's what I did. In Smith's archive at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona, I made about 25 trips out there over a few years and spent probably about 30 weeks in the archive. And that was the book that came out in 2001. There's a new edition of that, and the Jazzloft project came out last summer from University of Chicago Press. So I'm working on this Pittsburgh project. I'm working on this book. I'm working on an exhibition of those photos. And I noticed there's a whole wall of tapes in the back of the photography archive. There's Smith in 1958. So I noticed there's this wall of cardboard boxes that are filled with these tapes, these reels of tape that are in the back of the photography archive. They're in the same boxes they were in when they arrived in 1978, when Smith's archive was created. Nobody had touched them. It's a overworked, underfunded photography archive, and audio was just not in their mission statement. But thank goodness they saved them in a climate-controlled setting. And so then I noticed those tapes, and there were names like Thelonious Monk on them, and I just was enthralled to hear them. But they had a policy that we could not listen to them until they were properly preserved, which was the right policy because they feared catastrophic loss during playback. And that's where the Logans came in. So I wrote a story about this loft, and here's a picture of it. 28th Street and 6th Avenue. It's on 6th Avenue, in between 28th and 29th. Smith moved into there in the middle of his Pittsburgh project and kind of abandoned his family. There's a lot of grit and sadness to this story. But he moves into the 4th floor of this building. You can see his camera up there in the window. And he proceeds to wire the building with microphones and recorders, and he made about 4,000 hours of tape that we now know. But so I wrote a story about that for a magazine called Double Take, and I'm like working at a bookstore at this time in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I got a call. I was trying to figure out how we're going to raise money. This story is all told in the film, but I just want to going to personalize it a bit. And I'm in the film quite a lot. It's quite funny because I usually am critical of films that are driven by talking heads, and you'll get tired of seeing me as a talking head in this film. But I wasn't sure how we were going to raise the money for these tapes because they did not have a very good reputation in the photography world. Because Smith had used all of his resources to buy these tapes. They're expensive. All the equipment in the photography world thought that he should have been using those resources and time for his photography, not these, wild tapes. So it's hard to raise money for tapes that don't have a good reputation. So I wrote a story about this for Double Take, and then one night I'm sitting in my house and I get a call from David Logan in Chicago, and he says that piece in the magazine got a lot of attention. I was on CBS Sunday Morning, and David, who was elderly at the time, was on his treadmill watching CBS Sunday Morning, and I was on there talking about this, and so then he gets the magazine and he tracks me down, calls me, and says, "What can we do to help?" And since then, the Logan family, that big foundation got split into three foundations, and the three sons run it now in their own foundation, and they've supported me. And we would never be here. After we were able to get this off the ground, we got federal grants and private grants and all kinds of things, but without the Logans, it never would have happened. And Dan Logan just texted me about 15 minutes before this started. He's one of the sons. He lives in Alexandria, and he was on his way here, but he's been recovering from an illness, and he was on his way in an Uber and actually had them turn around and go back home. So I wanted to thank him here. He made this particular event possible, and his family, the whole project. So I'm going to let the film speak for itself now. I was going to try to finish at 7:18, and that's what time it is. So let you watch the film, and then I'll be here to take questions. Yeah.
Let me ask you, how much of the tape have you preserved?
All of it.
All of it?
Yeah, we were able to do all of it. It was funny, but this project lasted so long that when I first started raising money for it in about the year 2000, 1999, 2000, the standards established here, the archivists here were key to our grant proposals. The standards were that audio was to be preserved in analog. Digital was not considered a proper preservation at that time, and it's still debatable. If you go to some conferences, you can see some smart people debating it because nobody knows how long. We know that a piece of tape in the climate control will last 100 years. We don't know what happens to digital, and if you don't, this goes for family photography too, and videos. If you don't migrate it properly, you could lose it over time. And
It's stored where?
the University of Arizona, and.
Are records been made of them, or what?
Well, that's a good question. I jumped out of this about 10 years ago, and I've been doing other things. And I was exhausted, worn out, and kind of tired of it. To be honest with you, and I was tired of raising the money, and driving it, and I wanted to. I'm a writer, and that's what I wanted to get back to, just pure writing. And but there's still some things that are left undone in this project, and one of them is getting the material out there into the public. But it would probably take me about 2 years to do that. And I do think I'm probably the only one that can do it, along with my colleague who listened to all the tapes as well, because nobody knows where the material is, but it would take me probably 2 years to do it, and I just can't do it unless somebody's offering me a salary and benefits, and I don't have to raise my own salary and benefits anymore after 20 years of doing that. So, and that usually ends the conversation because but something should be done with that audio, and that's one of the things left is to get it out in the public, because I do think that Smith achieved something extraordinary with this audio, and it's one of a kind, urban.
Quality of it.
A lot of it's great. I mean, you'll hear some of it in this film. Some of it's terrible. Some of it's great. The thing that's interesting to me in the jazz perspective is jazz history is told from the point of view of the very tip top, like minuscule percentage of what actually happened in the history of jazz, the best stuff that got recorded. The whole history is told from this tiny, tiny point of view. It's just the greatest music that was ever made in this genre. That's how the history's told. Well, what is that supposed, I mean, how is a student supposed to feel about that? Because there's no way you can play like that every single night of your career. There's some nights you're going to be terrible. There's some nights, you know, you're still practicing something, you're not good at it yet. You're rehearsing, it's trial and error, you're failing, and then you finally get it. Well, that failing part is not part of the history, but it's on these tapes. And I've played these tapes for like students at Juilliard and Berkeley and other music schools, and they're like, God, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear that these musicians were not always perfect, you know, and because, you know, they listen to the records and they think, God, how can I live up to that, you know? So, and there's a lot of stuff on these tapes that has nothing to do with the jazz except for giving you a period of time, kind of cultural documentary on what was going on in the country, because Smith would run the tapes for radio and TV news and random conversations, and so it's just like a urban field work post-war like none other. And I think Sarah did a really good job. It was a really difficult film to make because there's so much there. I used to say we were 1 degree away from anything, and one time somebody challenged me on that, and so we opened it up to the floor to say, just name anything, and I could think of a tape that was 1 degree away from it. It's just incredible what Smith did. I mean, it you know, it wrecked his family, it wrecked his bank account, it did a lot of negative things, but I'm glad we have it. Any other questions?
You mentioned your colleague listened though. Has he made an inventory? We kind of know which artists are on which tape?
Yeah, he's indexed everything, but towards the end, in the last couple of years, we were going pretty fast because we could see our funding diminishing, but it's really you know, like if you see Roland Kirk's name on the tapes, I mean, we just have so much information about what that actually is that would save so much time from pointing to people who could do something with it. And I also believe a greatest hits from the tapes is not a representation of what Smith achieved. And that also ends the conversation because, you know, people want the greatest hits because it'll sell, but I really am committed to putting the whole of it out there because, like I said, you know, if you document only the great stuff, that's not actually what happened in the history. So, so I'm committed. I'm not going to do it if we're not going to do all of it, and so that usually ends it.
Is that index online?
It's not online, no. It's actually at the University of Arizona, and there's a duplicate of it at Duke University Library, and those are where it is. Any other questions? Well, thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoy the film, and I will be here when it's over. Thank you.